Welcome to Education Forum. I'm Herman Badillo, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the City University. The improvement of education affects all New Yorkers. This program will focus on the key educational issues and challenges before us all. My guest today is Michael Goodwin, who has just been appointed the executive editor of the New York Daily News. Mr. Goodwin was a graduate in English from Columbia University. He served for many years as reporter and City Hall bureau chief for the New York Times. Then in 1991, he came to the Daily News, where he was first the deputy editorial page editor and then the editorial page editor. And just to give you an example of what he has done, over the years the News has gotten many Pulitzer Prizes, but last year the News got the Pulitzer Prize for the series of editorials on the Apollo Theater. But in addition to that, the same year, the News Editorial Board garnered a prestigious first place award from Sigma Delta Chi, the National Society of Professional Journalists, and a coveted Deadline Award from that group's New York chapter. Those awards were given for editorials urging changes in the City University of New York, and that's the reason I wanted Mike to be here, because Michael, I've reviewed once again the editorials last year, and it's a tremendous number of editorials on the subject of the City University, right. And you certainly deserve the award. But how come that you got so interested in the City University?
Well, it's actually a bit of irony that you have me here, and I appreciate the opportunity, because it was watching a former chancellor of City University on this very show, which of course is long running, but the show, I believe, came in early 1995, and it had to do with budget cuts that the governor was then proposing for CUNY as well as SUNY. Governor Pataki had just taken office. And this former official of CUNY, whom shall remain nameless, alleged in front of a room full of students, student journalists, that the cuts were partly sexist and partly racist. And I remember that comment as though it were yesterday, because I think it went to the heart of what I thought was an unfair charge. The Daily News was taking no position on whether the budget should be cut, but the notion that any cut was somehow a sexist and racist attack on CUNY, I thought was outrageous. And so it got our attention, so to speak, and got us to look more carefully at what was really going on with CUNY and with the budget in general. And what we found began to inform that series of editorials that you mentioned.
Well, actually, I've been on the board since 1991. And the reality is that both Governor Cuomo and Mayor Dinkins increased the tuition and made cuts. So it wasn't
right.
It wasn't anything to do with Pataki or Giuliani.
But it was an easy charge to make against Republicans. It was an easy thing to say that they're all racist and everything. And I don't make any brief for the Republican Party, but I just thought those charges were very unfair in light of what was actually going on at CUNY.
Well, actually, the way that the recent turmoil, if you want to call it that, at the City University got started was that in May of '97, I got a call from the Daily News that there were some students demonstrating outside Astos Community College. And I looked into it and I found out that they were demonstrating because they wanted to graduate without being able to pass a test in reading and writing English, which was supposed to be an entrance test, right. And it had become, over the years, an exit test. Right. And it was even diluted at Astos. So then when we got into an argument with the president of Astos, who admitted that she had changed the rules, the chancellor suggested that it was only at Astos, but we found out when a lawsuit was brought that the same thing was going on at the other community colleges. And that led to the chancellor's resignation, and it led to a whole review of what was going on. But in those days, I couldn't get information about what was going on. So it was the Daily News editorial board that brought out the facts that even though these students who came in, 87% of them, couldn't require remedial assistance, they were all, for the most part, more than 50% were getting A's and B's.
Right.
See? So that began the whole series of my looking into the issue of remediation, which led to the policy that got approved by the board to eliminate remediation before you could matriculate at the senior colleges. And then we got it approved by the Board of Regents. And I want to thank you because the Board of Regents was more complicated. It required the support of a lot of other people, and your editorials last year made it possible.
Thank you. We have a great interest in CUNY, the Daily News does, and I think that it is important for people to know the facts about what's going on, because you can make a lot of charges based on a limited amount of information, but I think that what we tried to do was to get the facts. Even though we were the editorial board and we were writing opinions, we believed that you should do a lot of reporting before you give your opinion and get the facts. And we did that. And what was, as you mentioned, that 50% of the grades were A's and B's. Meanwhile, in some of these schools, less than 1% of the students were graduating on time. So you had a lot of students who never graduated, but who got very high marks. So there was something fundamentally wrong in the community colleges. You saw it in the senior colleges, too, where a lot of kids came in unprepared, never really graduated, stayed around in remediation programs forever. The programs didn't really help most of the kids who went into them, but they did drag down the colleges themselves. A disproportionate amount of money and faculty time went to it. So I think that over the years, what we discovered and what we wrote on the editorial page and subsequently in the news pages as well, the Daily News, was that the university had become kind of bogged down in this as a remediation mill, that a lot of kids went into it, but very few of them came out. And so you had the university kind of suffering as a result of what may well have been good intentions to help these kids, but in the end it wasn't helping them, and it was hurting the kids, everybody else in the system.
Well, I was opposed to the open enrollment program in 1969 when I was president of the Bronx, long before I even heard of Giuliani or Pataki. Right. Because I'm a graduate of City College. I said that if you lower standards, you reduce the value of a city university diploma. And whoever you are, you have to be able to pass tests. I mean, I'm a CPA and a lawyer because I passed the test. Right. But we found, with your help, that there were teachers, students who were graduating to be teachers who could not pass the teacher's exam in English. Right. And that, of course, has to be corrected.
Right. I mean, I think one of the interesting things, you mentioned open admissions going back to the late 60s, and I think that I'm a little younger than most of those debates at the time, although I may not show it, but I think what was going on then was a real reaction to the fact that many minorities had been shut out of many institutions of higher learning, not just CUNY. Many workplaces had shut them out. And so I think there was a kind of revolution in the air, and I think that it was very, very well intended to open the gates, and I think access to opportunity was proper, and it was absolutely the right and understandable thing to do. But that's not the issue now. I think that the issue now is that can access still be there for qualified kids who are ready to accept higher education? I think to say that we just open the gates to everybody in this day and age doesn't make sense when most of the students are going to be minority in any event. No matter what standards you set, you're still going to have a very high enrollment of minority students. So then you don't have to sort of throw open the gates to everybody just to show that you're open-minded. That's not, it only hurts everybody.
Well, we want to have access, but the point is we're not helping anyone.
That's right.
If they give them a diploma and then they can't perform when they go out to get a job. So what we really have to do is to ensure that we have a real educational system. Now, one of the areas where you have been especially helpful is to tie in the problems of the city university with the problems of the regular school system. Right. Because it's not our fault that students come in with a high school diploma who can't read and write and do arithmetic at the 12th grade level. That goes back into the business of social promotion at the educational system. Right. And there you have spent just about as much time as you have on the city university.
I mean, there's no question that you need to have a well-educated citizenry, not just for the individual's sake, as in their own future, their own ability to support themselves and their family, but as a nation, as a city, as a state, we need a well-educated citizenry to be good citizens, to keep democracy alive, to go forward into the next century. I mean, that's what education does for people. It doesn't just get them a better job, it makes them better people. But it's got to be real education, too. It can't just be pretend education where you just show up. I mean, one of the one of the regents who voted against remediation, for example, said that access to higher education should be as open as access to health care. Now, would you want a phony doctor? You've got him a broken leg, he or she puts a Band-Aid on, says, fix, you're okay. I mean, that's what a phony degree does in education. It doesn't really help you. It just fools you. And there was a kind of fraud going on with the students. And when you're teaching teachers the same way, they're going to go back and teach the next generation of students. So you get this cycle of failure that just keeps perpetuating itself.
And the tragedy is that we got the remediation resolution approved by one vote. And I mean, it's really astonishing.
Right.
And that vote, ironically, was the vote of Harold Levy, who
Yeah.
was the last one to vote, and now he's the school's chancellor.
Yeah.
So we've been working with him to tie in so that we have establish a system that would be in effect K through 16 to ensure that we have higher standards. What's your opinion of Harold?
Well, I've met and talked with Harold Levy quite a few times, and he's a very interesting guy. He's very committed to public education, and I think it's wonderful that he's taken a leave from his corporate position to do this job, and he's just recently been named on a permanent basis. I think it's also very helpful that he and Mayor Giuliani have begun to work together a little bit instead of attacking each other quite so much. I think that bodes well. I will say that I think the jury is still out on one fundamental question about Harold Levy, and that is his relationship with the United Federation of Teachers. Now, I think the Teachers Union is an excellent advocate for its members. It's far less than excellent, though, when it comes to advocating for children. I think it advocates only for its members. That's what unions do. And I think Harold Levy has had the support of the UFT, and it's going to be interesting to see whether he can steer a tough course, because there are a lot of issues that involve the teacher's contract.
Well, that's coming up this year,
Right,
so
and
we'll
he's
know
gonna,
soon.
That's right. And I think he's going to have to take a very hard look, and he's going to have to make some very unpopular decisions. And I think that's where the rubber will meet the road. Will he have the confidence and the courage to take on the people who have supported him in this position? Because if he doesn't get some significant work rule changes in the teacher's contract, it's going to be very hard to manage the schools. Right now, the principals can't do very much. The principals need to have more authority. The teachers need to be held more accountable for the performance of their students.
Okay, we'll talk about some of the changes that should come about after these announcements.
I haven't made up my mind yet. What are you going to take?
Algebra.
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 If no one's explained how algebra, geometry, and calculus can improve your future, demand that you be told. Call NACME. We'll tell you.
We're back today with Michael Goodwin, newly appointed executive editor of the New York Daily News. Michael, what changes would you recommend to Chancellor Levy for the teacher's contract?
Well, I think there are a number of issues, again, that the Daily News editorial page has pointed out. One, I'll give you an example. It's a small program. It's called the Peer Intervention Program. It's not very large, but I think it's sort of symbolic of how the system works. If a teacher is about to be criticized by his or her principal and evaluated in a negative sense, the teacher can call a timeout and ask for a peer intervener, another teacher, to be sent by the Board of Education. And for up to a year, the peer intervener can work with the teacher in the classroom. But for the first 3 months of that year, the principal is not allowed to evaluate the teacher, and the conversations between the two teachers are confidential. So that teacher can be telling another teacher, I hate children, I want to kill children, or something, I don't know what I'm doing here, I'm lost, I hate teaching. The principal can't find that out.
It's
now,
almost like the priest and penitent privilege in law.
Now how can we hold the principal accountable if the principal is barred from entering the classroom? And that's just one example of the kinds of things where the system is tilted to the union. The union is forever. Chancellors come and go, mayors come and go, but the union is forever. And with each contract, it gets a couple of more inches. And there are many terrific teachers who do a wonderful job. And my own daughter has a fabulous teacher. But there's also a union contract that prohibits accountability, that shields wrongdoing, that does not give the real authority to the managers of the system. And that has got to change.
What bothers me, Michael, and the question of trying to bring about changes is the political nature of this debate, because it has become primarily a question of Republicans against Democrats. I really, as you know, I'm a Reformed Democrat going back into history.
Right.
But I became a Republican because I was accused of being a tool of Pataki and Giuliani because I want to change at CUNY. And I said, look, I want change at CUNY because I'm a graduate of City College. But if you're saying that the idea of standards is a Republican idea, I'm going to become a Republican. And I did.
Right.
But I'm struck, and maybe you can help, to try to explain why is it that the idea of bringing about changes has become a Democrat against Republican idea?
That's a very difficult question, and I, certainly acknowledge that you have been a groundbreaker in the whole CUNY situation. I think it's unfortunate that it's become polarized along partisan lines. I think that is absolutely unnecessary. I don't think that that any party should have a lock on standards, but I think the Democrats, by default, have let the Republicans seize that issue. And I think that the only Mark Green, whom I think is a very smart fellow, the city's public advocate, made an observation recently that one of the things about Mayor Giuliani that Green likes, which surprises me, is that Giuliani is a leader. And he said that, by contrast, many Democrats are brokers. So they kind of survey the different special interest groups in the Democratic Party and say, oh, is that okay with you? Is that okay with you? Is that okay with you? And so in the end, there's no leadership. There's just a kind of collection of people all working their will on the leader, and the leader is paralyzed by the fear of offending any one of the groups. And I think Giuliani, by contrast, has been successful in saying, no, this is what leadership is. Here's the right way to do it. Here's what we're going to do. And he's done that on CUNY, and you've certainly been very much involved in that. And I think the difference between a leader and a broker is a difference right now in a lot of politics between Democrats and Republicans.
Well, you helped to shape public opinion, and here's the problem. We have the Republicans urging we have change. Then we have the Democrats opposing change. Then we have the parents who vote for the Democrats, but they agree with us.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile? How do we get beyond that gap, which is really the most interesting part of the whole thing?
Absolutely.
That the very people who would most benefit, the parents and the students who need to get a real diploma, who basically support us and who want choice, for example. They want charter schools. They want vouchers. They, at the same time, support people who don't want that, and so we end up having to squeeze things by one vote. What can we do to change that?
Well, it's a fascinating observation, the voucher debate, for example, this charter school debate. I'll give you another one. When Ted Forsman put up his private scholarship money for 1,300 scholarships a year for public school students to go to parochial and private schools, he had 22,000 applications for 1,300 spots. And these applications were all limited to just the very poorest districts where the schools were the worst. And these, coincidentally, were the schools where parents were not voting in the local school board elections. And many of us thought these parents are apathetic, they don't care. But when they had a chance to get their kids out, suddenly these parents were very involved. And I think that was fascinating because it shows they really do care, but they've given up on this system. They don't trust this system, they don't believe in it. And I think the way to reach those parents, to galvanize them, and perhaps they can bring real change in the system, is to bring them the facts. I mean, I believe that when people have the facts, people of goodwill and good intentions, when they have the facts, they will come to the right conclusion. But I think that the debate, as you correctly noted, gets so polarized along partisan and sometimes racial lines that the facts get lost. So I'm a big believer in facts.
Well, but apparently many of the political leaders don't seem to acknowledge is that when we talk of school choice, we talk of vouchers, for example.
Right.
We're talking about vouchers in the poorest areas of the
Sure.
city. The schools that have been under Regents' review because they have been awful schools for years and nothing is going on. And it's the parents of those schools who come to people like me urging that we bring about change, but their elected officials don't want change.
Right. I think that goes very much to the heart of the United Federation of Teachers and the other interest groups that are controlling the Democratic Party on some of these issues. I think that there's a big fear factor. There's a lot of I think fear-mongering in terms of what vouchers would do to the public system. It may be illegal. The Supreme Court may rule that vouchers do violate the constitutional separation of church and state. Nonetheless, there's no question that something needs to sort of break the monopoly hold that a lot of the unions have on the public school system. And not just to blame the unions, but the system isn't working for many of you. You have 100 failing schools, identified as failing schools in New York City.
For a long period of time.
That's right. There's a little bit of churning on the list, but some of these schools have been on the list for years. Daily News and just an editorial today said, why not turn some of them over to private schools, for-profit companies? Let them see if they can do a better job. Give somebody else a chance to do these schools better.
One of the things we're trying to do at the City University is we formed a Business Leadership Council to get the help of the business community to ensure that they will hire the students who graduate from the City University. Because up to now, we find that we have a large number of CEOs in my generation, but not in the current generation. So how can we convince the business leaders that they should get more involved in what's going on in our school system?
I think you're doing the right thing by raising standards. I think that's the way. Once that message is clear, once people believe it, once that's been established for a few years, and I believe that the public perception begins to change, then I think that you will have, as you once had, you will have the business community flocking to CUNY to look for talented graduates. And when that critical mass happens, you'll have a big change. So I think you're on the right path. I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think it's just steady work from here on out, getting your message out, keep going with the standards revolution, keep raising the bar, make it clear, and don't make a lot of exceptions to it. I'm not saying it has to be an iron rule, but it's got to be clear that there are high standards. And I think when people believe that it's here to stay, then I think you'll see the business community flock to it, because then it will be in their interest. Then the business community will see that these grads are ready to come into the workforce, they're ready to help us, they're ready to make New York better. Then CUNY will, I think, have turned a big, big corner.
And the other area where we need your support and the support of the public is in the area of the budget, because now that we have standards, it should be possible to seize the idea of increasing tuition and to get additional monies, because we have a large number of adjunct professors who do a job, but it's not as good as tenured professors who can be around all the time. So how can we get more support financially from Albany and City Hall?
I think you will get that support. I do believe that as the mayor, the governor, members of the legislature, and the city council begin to believe in CUNY again, I think you'll find a lot more public support for it. And I think that the legislature in particular stands ready to give the money. My concern is that they will sometimes give it without the standards. So I think, again, I hate to sound like Johnny One Note, but I think the push for standards, the push to get that message out loud and clear, I think will bring you support across the public spectrum.
Because for example, in the Board of Education, the UFT argues that you need smaller classes. And of course we do, but the question is, it's a chicken and egg. If you eliminate social promotion and you have standards, then it might be possible to do it. But again, it becomes political. The Democrats say, give us more money first. The Republicans say, change the standards first. So how do we reconcile that difference?
Well, I'll give you another example. The Democratic Party under Bill Clinton calls itself New Democrat, right? So the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, puts out a report on ending social promotion. It actually calls it taking responsibility for ending social promotion. Sounds good so far. In there it says that holding kids back who fail and social promotion are two sides of the same bad coin. So in other words, you push them onto another class all by themselves and you give them special help. So it's this failure, the failure of nerve, I think, ultimately, among Democrats is going to kill educational reform. So I think that you've got the right idea. I think that once you keep pushing it, once you see success, once students begin to benefit from it more and more, I think this thing will spread. I think you've got it. I think you just have to keep going with it.
Well, now that you mentioned President Clinton, the big problem we've had is that while we get lectures from Congress and from the President, we don't get very much money because they say that education is a local problem. Do you see a possibility that the federal government may want to, in the very near future, come in with providing more funds?
I do, because I tell you, one of the interesting things is that George Bush, the Republican nominee, for certain, has talked about not dismantling the Department of Education, as many
that's right.
Republicans in Congress want to do.
Yes.
He wants to expand it. He wants to fund. He also wants some standards. Now, as usual with most presidential candidates, there's a little vagueness around the edges about what they're really for. But you do have both Gore and Bush basically taking the same position vis-a-vis the federal involvement in public education. I think that's clearly the wave of the future. You're not going to dismantle the Department of Education. It's going to be expanded. There's going to be more federal money, particularly in the good times that seem to be here for a while.
Well, I certainly hope so, and I want to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Herman.
You can reach us by email at our website, www.cunytv.cuny.edu, or write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016. We look forward to hearing from you.